Good day and welcome. My name is Rick and I'm going to take you on a journey through the past. And today we're going to visit with our taste buds. I'm not going to talk about an event or a time or a battle or introduce you to any of my artifacts, though some of those will sort of come into it. Instead, I'm going to offer you an introduction to one of the staple foods of the British Isles for the last 1,000 years or so, possibly longer. And that is, of course, pottage. Now, pottage isn't the same as porridge, but they are related. They're a staple food. Certainly eaten from the sort of middle end of the Anglo-Saxon period, right through to the Wikipedia would have you believe 17th century. But I ate pottage growing up, and I'm so sure some of you did as well. Have you ever eaten a pottage of peas, a peas pudding? Even mushy peas, sort of, if you squint, they're a kind of pottage. Now, pottage is very simply something you cook in one pot. It's going to be vegetables and some sort of grain, and it's going to be somewhere between a soup and a stew. It's usually a fairly thick soup if it is on that side. It's not usually a really thick stew, but it can be. It's a family of dishes. At its basis, pottage is simple peasant food. It's the sort of thing that, along with bread and cheese, would provide the majority of the diet, majority of the calories for most people in this country, as I say, over the last 1,000 years. If you combine that with ale, with small beer, then actually you have a fairly nutritious diet. Those you're going to discover not one that's particularly protein heavy. So what's in a pottage? Pottage is cooked in one pot. You're usually going to start off by putting in some vegetables, which are going to be cooked relatively slowly in stock. So you're either going to be making the stock as your very first step, or and I'm going to cheat, you're going to use some pre-made stock. Then you're going to bulk it out with some grains. It could be wheat, could be rye, could be barley, could be oats. Not quite sure what I'm going to use yet. If you're richer, you want to add some more expensive ingredients. So you might want to put some meat or fish in there. If you've done a big roast, imagine you've killed and butchered a sheep. You've had a roast of mutton, but you've got some meat left. Maybe you've got some meat left on the bones. So you can start off making your stock from those bones, and you'll get some meat in by that. If you're richer still, so you're actually doing fairly well, maybe your pottage is going to be primarily made of meat, or if it's a sweet pottage, it's going to be heavily flavoured with things like almonds and spices such as saffron and sugar. A good historical example of pottage is frumentary. Now, frumentary is made with milk rather than with just plain stock, and it can be a sweet dish, made perhaps with almond milk, flavoured, as I suggest, with spices such as saffron and such as sugar, and then added with eggs. Or as a plainer dish, as a simpler dish, just plain dairy milk on its own, be it from goats or from cows, along with the grain, usually wheat. And it makes a good staple food. We know about this one because of this book. This is a modern reprint, but the form of curry was written around 1390 for, as you can see here, Samuel Pegg. He was the cook to the king, and he's got the first cookbook in English. And you can still get this. You can find this online if you wish, though the recipes are not necessarily the easiest to read. So if you do want to handle one of the recipes from here, feel free to get in touch, and I'm happy to talk you through what they actually mean. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to make a modern pottage using my modern kitchen, because whilst I'm quite well equipped here, I am limited by what I've got to hand. I'm going to use, as I say, modern methods. I'm going to use a modern cooker, a modern pans, but I'm going to do it quasi-authentically. So I'm going to make sure I only use vegetables and ingredients that are available or were available in, say, the 11th or 12th century. If you want to make a pottage at home, the things to remember are just to consider what flavours go well together with each other. You're going to be using an assortment of vegetables, possibly meat or fish if you're so inclined. You're going to use some sort of grain. You're going to flavour it with herbs, and unfortunately, I don't have any fresh herbs here, so I'm going to have to use dried. But you can use spices as well, and I may put a little bit of spices in mine. So, if you're ready, I'm transformed. I'm ready to get into the 12th century and get cooking. So, come with me. Let's step into the kitchen. Come on. Well, we're in the kitchen and ready to get going. I've put all my ingredients out, and this is everything I've got, which is authentic, or at least quasi-authentic to the 11th, 12th, 13th century. The reason I say quasi-authentic is because no food you can get today is the same as it was 800 or 1,000 years ago. It's all just better. Parsnips and carrots were smaller and woodier. We all know carrots were a bright orange now. They were orange in the past, but they were also sort of parsnip coloured, as a pale white, brownish, and sort of a purple as well. But this is what I've got, and these will make a pretty tasty pottage, I think. So let me introduce you to some of the ingredients. Let us begin with the grains. I've got 3 different grains which are suitable for making pottage. The first is the ubiquitous oat. Now, this is just the same sort of thing that you might put in your porridge. Then we've got barley. This is just pearl barley. Find it in almost any food aisle. And this is wheat. This is actually Bulgur wheat. Bulgur wheat is not particularly well known, if known at all, in Britain in the 11th and 12th centuries, but certainly in the Mediterranean, in Italy, Sicily, in the Levant, in the Holy Land, Bulgur wheat was well known as a staple of Middle Eastern cooking for a very, very long time. People who went to the Holy Land on crusade would certainly have been familiar with it. So we have the grains, but what else is there? Well, you're going to want root vegetables. You're going to want some sort of vegetable to start with. Onions or leeks, or possibly onions and leeks. You can use spring onions, they're good too. Something to give you a nice sort of fried up base. Then you're going to want some vegetables for flavour and for bulk. I've got carrots, parsnip and turnip. Turnip is very, very common in medieval cooking. I've also got some rocket, and I'm going to add that right at the end as sort of a garnish. Rocket is a very well known, lovely, flavourful green leaf. We love it now in my sandwiches, but 1,000 years ago people were loving it in their food as well. And I've also got some of my very favourite mushrooms. So with those to provide some nutrition, some flavour, some grains to bulk it out, it should be pretty good. All I'm going to need is some stock, and I can make the stock by boiling the vegetables for a long time. Or if I'd made a joint the night before, I could use whatever was left of that, just boiling the bones. Makes a lovely, lovely stock. I'm actually going to cheat and use some bouillon powder, but you could use a stock cube. You could use pretty much whatever you like. For the last thing I'm going to use to give me some flavour, some nutrition, is in this jug. Lovely frothy beer. Beer was an important part of the regular diet of normal people, but of the great and good as well. Small beer was not only very safe to drink, but it could be pretty flavourful. Think of it as a very, very weak mild, or even a weak shandy, and it's full of nutrition. This, however, is not small beer. This is a strong ale, so I'm going to use it quite sparingly, but I suspect I'm going to end up making quite a lot of food. So that's my ingredients. Let's get cooking. Right, well, hopefully this is going to work. This is very much an experiment. So I'm going to use a completely inauthentic pan. I do generally cook over an open fire with a cast iron cauldron, which makes for a different cooking experience. This time I'm going to use a gas hob and stainless steel. I've got all of my ingredients ready, so what I need to do is get the fire lit which is going to be much easier, and get some oil in there. Authentically, olive oil is usable. It's very expensive in England, so butter is probably a more usual fat. But I'm cooking for a relatively high status household, or it's in Sicily or something, because I'm definitely going to use olive oil today. So let's get the fire going. Do forgive the inauthentic olive oil. Okay, so we've got the oil up to temperature. It's not yet bubbling away, but it's coming up nicely. So I'm going to add the onions and just get that sort of frying off. Once that's done, I'm going to start adding the other ingredients bit by bit. Don't know if you can hear that, but the onions are now sizzling away. So I've got my onions bubbling away, just using an olive wood spatula to keep them from sitting into the bottom of the pan. This bit is just like you fry up onions at home. Right, I don't know if you can see that, but the onions are coming up lovely. So what I'm going to do is add the next thing, and that for me is going to be mushrooms. Got my mushrooms here, all nicely chopped up, ready to go. So they're going just straight into the pan. So this is where things can go wrong. Right, I've got it all bubbling away now. It's onions first, just browned off. Then I've added the mushrooms and a little bit of stock, about 2 pints of stock. Once those mushrooms were starting to be cooked through, I've added all of the root vegetables. So the parsnips first, then the carrots, then the turnips. Now I thought I had filmed myself doing all of that, but it seems like I might not have done. So do forgive me for not going through it bit by bit. But essentially you're putting all of your veg, all your flavour in the pan, and you go cook it now for quite a while. So the first bit of the cooking took probably 10 minutes, and you need to keep on top of it then. Now all I'm going to do is cover it over and leave it to get good. I'm going to turn the heat down. At the minute it's on a high heat, I'm going to turn it down to a medium heat, and we're going to come back in about 25-30 minutes. Right, it's all been bubbling away for a little bit now. It's not quite been half the hour, but let's see how it's going. Oh, look at that. It's looking pretty much spot on. The turnips turn nice and yellow. I've got lovely colour from the carrots as well. I've got my flavourings in there as well. So everything is looking exactly as it should. Whilst it's all bubbling away, time is now to get some seasoning ready. Unfortunately, I don't have any access to fresh herbs. Otherwise, I'd like to use thyme and parsley just to really bring out some flavours. And even more unfortunate, I don't have either thyme or parsley on my herb shelf at the moment. So instead, what I'm going to use is some bay leaves, some rock salt, and this is long pepper. You've probably got one of these in your kitchens at home. This is pestle and mortar. Heavy old thing made of marble in this case, but I've got brass ones which I use for medicine, and wooden ones which I use when I really want to make life difficult for myself. So what I'm going to do is take the peppers. Actually, I'm going to take the rock salt as well. So I'll pop my bay leaves just there. I'm going to stick them all in here. Just going to give it a nice grind. I'm going to stick them all in the pan. There you go. That's my salt and my pepper mixed up. So salt and pepper, this is going to be quite an expensive and hopefully delicious pottage once it's all done. So let's have a look. Oh, this is bubbling away nicely in here. So all I'm going to do is add my seasoning and then cover it over for a little bit longer. Salt and pepper, into the mix. Make sure you get all the residue out, don't want to lose anything. And then got 1, 2, 3 dried bay leaves. So give that a quick stir. Cover it up again. Right, so it's been bubbling away for a little bit. It's all looking good in there now. So what I'm going to do is add the wheat. I'm going to add the grain, give it a good stir, turn the heat down further, and leave it to cook for another probably 30 or 40 minutes, more or less until I get hungry. With this wheat in here, it's now thickening up, and I want to put some extra liquid in. So what I'm going to do is just add that beer I talked about. So this is 600 mils of a lovely stout. You can put whatever kind of beer you wanted, cider, wine. If you wanted to use something non-alcoholic, then elderflower or ginger beer might be nice, or just use more stock if you need to. You are going to want to keep an eye on it, make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan, keep it moving occasionally. And don't forget to give it a taste to make sure you like what the flavour is, and add extra herbs, spices, a little bit more stock, whatever you need just to make it taste good to you. With the wheat and with the beer in there, it's really changed the smell, changed the look of it as well. So it's been bubbling away. I've added the grain, I've added the beer, everything is in there now, all the ingredients are together. Let's see how it's coming on. Yeah, you can see it's changed colour completely. We've still got the lovely yellow from the turnip, the lovely orange from the carrot. Lots of lovely colours in there, and that variety of colour is going to be important to keep your food looking interesting on your plate. So I've got my pottage all nice and done. It's about ready to go. Let's just give it a try. Yeah, that'll do. So, because I kind of fluffed up doing some of the videoing earlier, let me go through the method. Going to start off, you're just going to fry off your onions. If you've got leeks, you can fry them off at the same time. In a bit of butter, a bit of olive oil, something like that. Once that's ready, I added some mushrooms. It's a good time to do that if you're doing mushrooms. If you're using garlic is a beautiful thing to add, and very popular in the medieval diet. You can add that in at that point as well. Once the mushrooms were cooking through, I put in 2 pints of stock, which I just made up from bouillon, and then I added my root vegetables, in this case carrots, parsnips and a turnip. Once those were nicely cooked, I put some seasoning in, so that was long pepper, salt and just 3 bay leaves. Next, once that was all cooked for about half an hour, I put in the grain, so I used Bulgur Wheat, but you can use oats or barley or rye, and I also added in a pint or just over a pint of strong ale, but you can put in whatever other liquid you like. You can cook pottage for a very long time if you've got an open fireplace. It's got an ingle nook, sort of a little raised platform just to one side of the hearth. That's for keeping your long cooking dishes on. Just make sure that if you're doing that, you keep an eye on it, give it a stir every now and again and keep it topped up. Don't want it burning to the bottom of the pan, it will never come off. But this is now ready to go, so I'm going to turn the fire off. I'm going to stick it in a bowl and get myself some food. So just a piece of bread in my bowl, then some pottage on top. If you are lucky enough to get a bay leaf, as I have, Make sure you take that out. It's not good eating on a bay leaf. So that's the finished thing. So there is my pottage. I've added a little bit of rocket to it, give it a bit more colour so it looks a bit more pleasant, but also just give it a little bit more flavour as well. Wow, I've got my pottage here and it's pretty good. I hope I've given you some idea of what medieval food might have looked like. Probably not as vividly coloured because modern vegetables are not quite the same as they were in the times past. But there's no reason that food from the past can't be very tasty, and maybe you can make something inspired by it from what's in your food cupboards today. Hope you've enjoyed what I've shown you today. If you do try your own pottage, let me know how it goes. Hopefully yours is going to be as tasty as mine. If you enjoyed this, then I'm going to put a couple of extra links, possibly on the screen, but more likely down in the information below, for other people who've done other similar types of things. Until next time, stay safe, stay happy, and I'll see you in the future. Bye.